It's late at night on a highway somewhere in America. A car pulls off the road. A tired driver walks into a small motel, and the person standing behind the front desk has a last name you have probably seen before, even if you never noticed it: Patel. This is not one lucky family. This is not one lucky town. Across the United States today, Indian Americans own close to 60% of all hotels and motels in the country. Out of that group, a huge share, close to 70%, share one single last name: Patel. Think about that for a second. One surname, tied to one small region of India, somehow ended up owning a piece of almost every highway exit in America. How does something like that even happen? This story is not about luck. It is about a group of people who arrived in a new country with almost nothing and slowly, quietly, built one of the largest business networks in American history, one small motel room at a time. Welcome to World Citizens, where we uncover the hidden stories of communities that cross borders and quietly reshape the world around them. If you enjoy stories about immigration, culture, business, and the people behind the changes we often take for granted, subscribe to World Citizens, like this video, and join us for the journey. To understand how this started, we have to go back to a very dark moment in American history: World War II. In 1942, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, fear spread across the country. The United States government forced more than 120,000 Japanese Americans out of their homes and into internment camps. Families who had spent years building small businesses, farms, shops, and hotels suddenly had to leave everything behind in just a few days. In California, many small hotels were left empty overnight. Some were sold for almost nothing. Some were simply abandoned. This tragedy for one community became an unexpected opening for another. A young immigrant from Western India named Kanjibhai Manchhu Desai had been living in the United States for years, working hard labor jobs like many early immigrants from South Asia did at that time. Desai did not have much money. He did not speak perfect English, but he noticed something other people were not paying attention to. A hotel was not just a way to make money, it was also a place to live. In 1942, Desai and two other immigrants from Gujarat leased a hotel in Sacramento that had been left behind because of the internment. It was a small deal at the time. Nobody thought it would change anything, but it planted a seed that would grow for decades. A few years later, Desai moved to San Francisco and ran another hotel, the Goldfield Hotel. This hotel became something more than a business. It became a landing spot for new immigrants who kept arriving from Gujarat with no job, no home, and no plan. Desai gave them a place to stay, some temporary work, and advice. And that advice was simple: if your last name is Patel, lease a hotel. That one sentence traveled through letters, through cousins, through entire villages back in Gujarat. It told people something important, that in America there was an opportunity waiting, not in big offices, not in factories, but in something much smaller and much simpler: roadside motels that most Americans did not want anymore. For almost 20 years, this stayed a small story. A few families here and there, picking up a few motels. Nothing that looked like it would ever become a national pattern. Then, in 1965, everything changed. The United States passed a new immigration law that removed old rules which had limited how many people could come from Asia. Suddenly, thousands of families from India could enter the country in much bigger numbers. Some came as doctors, some came as engineers, but many came with nothing waiting for them except hard work and family support. Among these new arrivals were thousands of Gujarati families who had also been pushed out of East Africa in the early 1970s after a political crisis there. They arrived in America with very little money,
But at the exact same time, thousands of small roadside motels across the country were failing and desperate to be sold cheap. Two situations, one community with almost nothing and one industry with almost nobody who wanted it, quietly lined up at the same time in history. But there was a huge problem standing in the way. Even if a motel only cost a small amount of money, most of these new immigrant families could not walk into an American bank and get a loan. They had no credit history, no long relationship with any bank, sometimes not even a fixed home address yet. So how did families with almost nothing convince anyone to lend them enough money to buy an entire motel? What did they build instead of a bank loan that let them move faster than any local buyer with perfect credit? That part of the story is where things get really interesting, and we will get into exactly how they solved that problem right after this.
The answer to that problem was not a bank at all. It was trust. Inside the Gujarati community, there was already an old and simple system for lending money, one that did not need lawyers, contracts, or interest rates. People later called it the handshake loan. A cousin might give some money. An uncle might hand over his life savings. A group of friends from the same village back in Gujarat might all put in a small amount together. There was no paperwork, there was no bank sitting in the middle, just one simple understanding. If this motel succeeds, the next family in line will get the same kind of help when it is their turn. This meant that when a struggling motel came up for sale for a low price, a Patel family could move fast. They did not have to wait weeks or months for a bank to approve anything. They could shake hands, gather the money from relatives, and buy the property almost immediately. And because the people lending the money were family, not strangers, nobody was rushing anyone to pay it back fast. It was built for the long run, not for quick profit. One motel owner in Texas explained it simply. His father borrowed money from 3 cousins and 2 friends from their village. There was no formal contract, just a handshake, and everyone believed that once they succeeded, they would help the next family do the same thing. That single idea, repeated family by family, created something that worked almost like a private banking system stretched across the whole country. And it kept sending money quietly back and forth between motels in America and villages in Gujarat. Buying the motel cheaply and getting the money fast was only part of the plan. The second part is what really changed everything, and it came down to who actually worked inside these motels. In most American-owned motels at that time, the biggest cost of running the business was paying workers. Someone to clean the rooms, someone to sit at the front desk, someone to fix things when they broke. For Patel families, there was a very different setup. The family did not hire outside workers. The family became the workers. If you walked behind the lobby counter of many of these motels, you would find a small door, and behind that door was where the family actually lived. A kitchen, a couple of bedrooms, sometimes a child's school backpack sitting on the floor. The father usually handled repairs and worked the front desk. The mother cleaned the rooms and did the laundry. The children helped out after school, answering phones, checking in guests, folding towels. Their labor did not cost the business anything extra because it was simply part of family life. This one difference changed the entire math of the business. A motel that needed to charge $40 a night just to cover staff salaries somewhere else could be run by a Patel family for $20 a night because there was no staff to pay in the first place. Slowly, motel by motel, that price advantage started adding up across the country. Of course, this way of living came with a real cost, especially for the children who grew up inside these motels.
Some of them later talked about hearing their father working in the middle of the night, or watching their mother clean rooms, no matter how exhausted she was. Homework often got done sitting behind the front desk. Weekends were not for playing, they were for helping clean rooms or run the laundry machines. It was not an easy childhood. But little by little, motel by motel, this pattern kept repeating itself across state after state, and the network kept growing quietly along America's highways. As the number of Patel-owned motels kept climbing through the 1980s, something else started happening too. People began to actually notice the pattern. And once people noticed, it did not always bring a warm welcome. So what happened when an entire country slowly started to notice that one family name kept showing up behind motel counters everywhere they traveled? And how did that attention turn from simple curiosity into something much harder for these families to deal with? By the 1980s, people traveling across America were noticing something they could not ignore anymore. Motel after motel, the name behind the front desk kept being the same: Patel. What had grown quietly for decades was suddenly visible, and that visibility did not always bring a friendly reaction. Some travelers would walk up to the front desk, see a brown face, hear an unfamiliar accent, and simply turn around and leave without saying a word. Other guests openly questioned whether the people running the motel were really American at all, even though many of these families had already been living in the country for years, raising children who were born and raised as Americans. After the September 11th attacks in 2001, this kind of suspicion got worse. Some travelers assumed that any owner with an Indian last name must be from the Middle East, and a number of motel owners felt pressured enough to put small signs in their windows that simply said, "American-owned." It was a strange and painful irony, families who had lived and worked in the country for decades having to prove in writing that they belonged there. The pushback did not only come from customers walking through the door, it also came from other motel owners in the industry. For a long time, roadside motels across the country had mostly been run by American families, but by the later part of the 20th century, many of those families were choosing to leave the business behind. The hours were long, the profits were shrinking, and the lifestyle was hard to sustain. Patel families, on the other hand, were willing to keep doing the work that others no longer wanted to do. They lived inside their motels, they worked long days that stretched late into the night, and instead of taking profits out of the business, they put almost every dollar straight back into buying the next property. Slowly, this pattern led to more and more motels changing hands into Patel ownership, one purchase at a time. Some people inside the industry started using a nickname for what was happening, calling it the Patel Motel Cartel. The word spread through newspapers and industry conversations, even though, as people who actually understood the community explained, there was nothing criminal or organized about it at all. It was simply a large network of relatives helping other relatives get started. The same handshake loan system that had worked from the very beginning, just repeated on a much bigger scale. By the early 2000s, the size of what these families had built together was too big to ignore anymore. What had started with one man leasing a single hotel back in 1942 had grown into a business network stretching across the entire country. Today, an organization called the Asian American Hotel Owners Association represents more than 36,000 hotels across the United States, and a large share of those properties are owned by families with roots in India. Together, these hotels employ over 1 million workers and generate billions of dollars every year. Even leaders at the very top of the hotel industry openly talk about this influence. The head of one major international hotel company once said plainly that people of Indian origin are the single biggest force inside the American hotel business today.
The story has also grown far beyond small roadside motels.
Indian American families now own properties across almost every level of the hotel industry, from cheap budget motels near the exit ramp, all the way up to major international hotel brands. Some families that started with one small struggling motel back in the 1970s now control property portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And something interesting has happened with the next generation. Many of the children who once did their homework behind a motel front desk or spent weekends cleaning rooms with their parents have gone on to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, and business owners in completely different industries. Yet many of them still say that growing up inside those motels shaped how they think about work, sacrifice, and opportunity for the rest of their lives. For most of these families, the motel itself was never really the final goal. It was only the first step, a way to build enough stability so that their children could reach further than they ever could. So the next time you are driving late at night and you pull off the highway to check into a small motel, take a moment to look behind the front desk. There's a good chance you will see that same name again, Patel, a name that once meant landowner back in the villages of Gujarat and now belongs to a family that helped quietly reshape an entire American industry. One room, one guest, one handshake at a time. Have you ever noticed this pattern while traveling across America? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories about how migration quietly redraws the map of the world, make sure you subscribe.